Chazal describe a certain malchus about Avram Avinu. Chazal say in Parshas Lech Lecha, where it says, Emek Shavei Hu Emek HaMelech, it says that all the Malachim gathered and were Mamlech Avram Avinu to be their Melech. Avram Avinu was called the Melech. In the beginning of this week's Parsha, Ephraim says to Avram Avinu, Nisi Eloikim Ata B'Seichenu. The Ramban uses that type of language also. You're our Melech. Malchus, majesty. And Sara as well is looked at as a Malka. The word Sara, thank you so much. The word Sara means like a noble woman, like a Sara. And we know, who could forget the words of Rabbi Akiva when his Talmidim were dozing off and he wanted to wake them up. And he said, Mipnei ma zachsa Esther limloich al kuf chav zayin Medina. Why was Esther zeicha to rule over 127 countries? And he explained, because Sara Imenu lived for 127 years. You have to ask yourself, what does living 127 years have to do with being a queen over 127 countries? What's the parallel, the chlal? And what does this have to do with telling his Talmidim to wake up? It's not like us, like you want your Talmidim to wake up, so you randomly, not me of course, but other people, randomly try to think of something sensational so they wake up. Certainly Rabbi Akiva picked an idea that was specifically suited to inspiring or even helping the Talmidim to wake up. So what was that? The Pashut reading of the first pasuk in the Torah, Vayiyu Chayei Sara, Mea Shana, Ve'esrim Shana, Ve'sheva Shanim, the years of Sara, 127 years, and then the pasuk ends, Shnei Chayei Sara, these were the years of Sara. And yes, Rashi brings and Chazal darshan that repetition, but I want to tell you what it sounds like if we just read it simply. If we simply read the pasuk is saying the years of Sara were 127 years, and all of them were the years of Sara. They were all her years. I was giving a shir in Waterbury last night. I mentioned, as many of you have seen me limping around the last few weeks, I mentioned that week that I missed a few days of yeshiva because I was in a lot of pain. And I was here in yeshiva on Sunday. I didn't come back till Thursday. And I went into that Shabbos feeling like we just did Shabbos. Because Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday didn't exist. So it was like, we just did this. And it's the next parsha, of course, Here goes my Shnai Mikavecha Targum, streak. I felt like the week wasn't mine. It wasn't my week. It kind of got ahead of me. It got past me. I didn't own the week. Okay, sometimes things happen that make us feel that way. But sometimes the way that we live our life is that life just passes by. That we don't live like truly, truly, truly alive, focused, engaged, living each day the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to live it. Shnei Chayei Sara. Sara was the queen of her days. She owned each day. She dominated. She was the noble woman, the aristocrat who owned her day. When she went to sleep at the end of the day didn't live her. She lived the day. It was her day. She owned it. Every day was filled. And Avram Avinu as well, the malchus of Avram and Sara, it doesn't mean they were king over people. They certainly didn't have a din of melech. But the idea of the malchus of Avram and Sara is the way that they lived their life. They were shaylate over their lives, meaning that they were fully, fully present and engaged in their lives. Shnei Chayei Sara. Why did Esther? What schus did Esther have to rule over 127 countries? Because her grandmother also ruled over 127. She ruled, she controlled, she owned 127 years. She was the Malka, just like Esther was a Malka. She was the Malka over her years. They didn't just pass her by. It wasn't just in a blur. It wasn't just like one day leading into the next. There was a sense of accomplishment and mission and purpose and engagement in every minute of every hour of every day of Avram and Sara. Talmidim are falling asleep, so Rabbi Akiva senses a certain lack of aliveness, of being fully vibrant and present in their avodas Hashem. You know, sometimes we could just like doze off, whether physically doze off or mentally doze off, we're just like not present. So Rabbi Akiva wants to bring back his Talmidim. He wants to tell them something that will make them re-engage, that will make them reconnect, that will make them realize the impact of every single day of their lives. So to wake them up, he tells them, "Mipnei ma zachsa Esther limlech al kuf chav zayin Medina," because of her grandmother who ruled over every single one of her years. This is something that, if you know, like true Balei Avoda, being fully alive, life is not a yes or no thing. Yes, if a heart is beating, it's alive, and if a heart is not beating, it's dead. But as you know, there's so many more layers of life. A person could be alive, but how alive is he? A person could be alive and he just feels the vibrations of his life. He can sense it. He just feels full, and all of us know what that means sometimes. To be fully, fully present in our lives. Rav Hutner once wrote a song in Yiddish. I don't remember the exact words, but the lashon that he writes in the song is that our days should be so alive that if we cut it, it would bleed. You know, that if we cut our day, it would bleed. Like it was just like such a like a live thing, like truly, truly alive. You know, there's a medrash in the end of the parsha when Avram Avinu was nifter. The medrash says that Avram Avinu was nifter b'seva toiva zakein v'saveya. He was nifter at an old age, zakein v'saveya. He was nifter satisfied. Chazal say this, that it says that Avram Avinu was nifter satisfied, is because tzaddikim have an unbelievable schus HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives them, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to alleviate for them the pain of death. And the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu alleviates the pain of death for tzaddikim is that while they're still alive, He shows them their schar in Olam Haba. And they get a sense of where they're headed, and you could imagine that it makes it a much smoother transition into the Olam of schar. And the Medrash there in the end of the Parsha brings a story. And it says that Rabbi Avohu also was such a tzaddik that before he was nifter, the Rabbeinu Shalom showed him his schar. Now, you understand that when we talk about schar, there are no human terms that we could give to the pleasure of the schar that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us. Rav Dessler, if you're familiar with Michtam Eliyahu, in the very, very, very beginning of Michtam Eliyahu, maybe it's even the first shtickle, if not, it's the second, in the entire set, in the Sefer, Rav Dessler talks about what it means, schar in Olam Haba, because Rav Dessler discusses the fact that the Gemara tells us a schar mitzvahs b'hai alma leka, that there's no schar for mitzvahs in this world. And Rav Dessler explains that the reason why there's no schar for mitzvahs in this world is not because there's like a decision, you're not going to get the schar, and this was sorry, you have to wait. The reason is because this world is incapable of providing any form of schar because it's just greater than the entire experience of this world. And he does something that Bali Musar, it's one of the techniques that Bali Musar had. The Alter von Kelm discusses this. Something, I think they call it harchavas hayiriya, like spreading it out, like explaining things in full measure. And he goes through, because the Mishnah says that Yafeh Shah Achas of a Kairas Ruach and Olam Haba Mikol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh, that one breath, one smell, so to speak, of Olam Haba is greater than the entire experience of Olam Hazeh. So when I learned this Mishnah the first time, I thought it meant that you could live your whole life in Olam Hazeh, and Olam Haba, even just a breath of Olam Haba is greater. But Rav Dessler says that that's not the pshat. He says, Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh, Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh is much greater than your experiences in this world. He says, Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh is, he says, imagine that you were able, and he goes in steps, so I'll go a little bit quickly because I want to get back to the Medrash. The Gemara, he says, imagine that you were able to combine into one moment, into 1 second, an experience. You were able to feel all of the pleasure and joy and nachas and geschmack that you've ever felt in your entire life, and squeezed into 1 minute. How do you think that would feel? You could get a lot of money for that on the streets if you were able to figure out how to market that, right? That level of pleasure. That's not Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh. He says, imagine that you were able to take all of the pleasure and joy and geschmack and nachas and satisfaction and meaning that not just you experienced in your whole life, and not just that you will ever experience in your whole life, but that you and the entire country that you're in ever experienced and ever will experience, and squeeze that into 1 moment. Would that be Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh? Imagine that pleasure. And he says, no, that's not Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh. That's just this country and this time. So imagine if we would put into 1 pill, into 1 capsule, we would put the experience of all of the pleasure and all of the joy, all of the satisfaction, all of the nachas of the entire world, their entire lives. Perhaps that is Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh. Can you imagine what we would die, right? If we felt that much pleasure, we would die. We're not built for so much happiness. But that's not Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh. Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh, he says, what about if I would take all of the joy and pleasure and nachas and geschmack that anyone alive ever felt and ever will feel, and anyone who ever lived ever felt and ever will feel? Perhaps that's Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh. But he says that too is not Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh. So finally he says, let's put into that capsule all of the geschmack, the nachas, the pleasure that all of humanity ever felt from the time the world was created until the end of time. Every human being, not the 8 billion that are alive now, but all the billions and billions that ever lived and ever will live. And the sum total of all of their pleasure and all of their joy and all of their nachas, and squeeze all of that into 1 moment of pleasure, he says that is what you call Kol Chayei HaOlam Hazeh. And he says, you know what a Kairas Ruach is? I'm going to say it in my mashal, okay? He says it in his, but I'm going to say based on his Torah, my mashal. Kol Chayei HaOlam, Kairas Ruach of Olam Haba is the equivalent of if Dovi decides to host a barbecue, and it's delicious, and he has steaks on the grill, and he knows all the tricks and everything, and it's, you know, the condiments and the thing, and he has there the right coals and everything. It's perfect, and it smells incredible. And he doesn't invite me, which of course is a fake story, because of course he would. But and he doesn't invite me, and I just pass by outside, and I go, oh, that smells good. That's a kairas ruach of Olam Haba, not Olam Haba itself. We're not talking about that. We're just talking about a me'ein, like a smell of Olam Haba. All of Olam Hazeh is not as pleasurable as not Olam Haba, but just the smell of Olam Haba. Okay? I want to explain something. When you're downstairs and we're davening Ma'ariv, and the Chazan says Yiskadav Yiskadav Shemei Rabbah, and you say Amen, that's it. You got all of that. The amazing thing is that you can continue to get more and more and more and more and more and more. And if this sounds unbelievable to you, that is the Yetzer Hara that's not allowing you to fully imagine how unbelievably, fabulously wealthy you are for every single day that you have the opportunity to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yes, it is fabulously incredible what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us and how meaningful it is to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and what we are connected with when we get to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Getting back to that Medrash, the Medrash says that Rabbi Avohu, before he died, they were megala to him in Shamayim, his schar in Olam Haba. And as I started to say, obviously there are no words, as now you can understand why, there are no words to describe, what should I tell you what his schar was like? I have nothing to even compare it to. So the Chazal use different lashonos, which of course probably have very, very deep meanings, to give some kind of a sense of what it could possibly mean. So Chazal say that his schar looked like 13 rivers of afarsimine oil, which was a very expensive aromatic oil. And somehow that represents an enormous, enormous, enormous schar. And Rabbi Vo had this vision before he passed away of these 13 rivers of afarsimine. And when he saw these 13 rivers, he said to the malach, or whoever it was that was being megala this to him, he said, whose are these? So they said, it's yours. So he said, all these for Avahu? Yes, these are all yours. Now, why did he say all these for Avahu? Wasn't that the point of showing it to him? They showed it, yeah, it's yours. I wasn't showing you someone else's, I'm showing you yours. My Rosh Shiva explained to us that the reason why he said, Kol ilain la'avahu, all of these for Avahu, is because even though Rabbi Avohu was such a tzaddik, and such a kaddish, and he knew what the schar of Olam Haba is like, but when he saw the unbelievable schar that was waiting for him, he could not believe how powerful his actions had been. He couldn't believe what his Torah had generated. He couldn't believe what his smile at a friend, what it created for him. He couldn't believe how the little tzedakah, every penny of tzedakah, what it caused for him. He just couldn't believe the effect of everything that he did. It was like, it's like when you invest in something and you think you're going to get, for every dollar you put in, you think you're going to get $100 back, and instead you get $100 million back. It's not like shock. It's like unfathomable. I knew that it was going to do well, this investment. I know Olam Haba is incredible, but I didn't realize it was this incredible. That's what Rabbi Vo said. And Rabbi say if Rabbi Vo couldn't believe it, we certainly have a hard time. And we need to remind ourselves the power of every tefillah, the power of giving chizuk to a friend, the power of being there for a brother or sister, the power of making a parent smile, the power of having another yid who's more distant from Torah feel a warmth or seen or heard by someone who learns Torah, the power of a word of a Gemara, the power of a kasha of a Tosfos. We cannot begin to fathom how wealthy we are. We cannot fathom. I used to think about this. It was one time, it's funny, I hurt my foot again, but many, many years ago, I broke my foot also. I don't know what it is about me and my foot. But at that time, I was having a very, very, very hard time. And I had 2 little children at the time, 2 infants. And I lived in Eretz Yisrael, and I broke my foot in America, so we had to get back to Eretz Yisrael. I was limping. My wife is holding a new baby that she just had, and we have an infant and all of our suitcases schlepping back to Eretz Yisrael, and I can't really walk. Not an easy time. And I was thinking about that, and thinking about that there's makom, and sometimes people get that way, that they feel a certain amount of resentment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem. What are you thinking? What's the plan here? But we know that when a person does the right thing and serves HaKadosh Baruch Hu and there's tsar, how much greater the schar is. We know the accomplishment is even more phenomenal. And I was thinking to myself, let's say I had that pain, let's say for 4 weeks, okay? I was thinking to myself that one day, after 120, I'm going to get up there and I'm going to see all the schar from those 4 weeks. Probably get added up. You know what I'm going to say? I know it. I'm going to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I'm going to say, you had to break my foot for 4 weeks. You couldn't break it for 8. That's what I'm going to say. Because I see what it produced. And at the same time, we want to put all of our koyach in while we're here, because the fabulous wealth of closeness to Hashem, of joy, of tainug, that we are going to receive for everything that we've done here is so phenomenal that I wonder if when we talk about Einshim and Shamayim, I don't know these things, but I wonder if the regret that we'll feel of what we could have invested in and we didn't. You know those people that were like, yeah, somebody told me there was a company, Apple, starting and I should invest. And I had like $5,000 to invest. But instead, I invested in a house that I moved out of a few years later. But my friend invested $5,000 and now it's worth $500 million. Right? Who knows, like back in the day. We don't want to be that guy. We want to be the guy that while we were here, that we invested, and we have insider trading. We know how much it's worth. We know, the world doesn't know. You can't see it now, but we know how unbelievably powerful it all is. And that's what we're getting back to how we started, about being alive, about taking advantage of every minute, about using every opportunity to be machazek yidden, about using every opportunity to talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, about using every opportunity to strengthen our emunah, about using every opportunity to learn Hashem's Torah, and to recognize that every single day is a day that if we put in with all of the energy that we have, it's a day that we own. It's ours. It's ours. You know, the Gemara says, and I'll end with this, the Gemara says in Kedushin that a zaken, you're supposed to stand up for an older person. A zaken doesn't just refer to an older person. It's a bit of a sugya, but it also is nutrikin zeh shekana chachma. It's also referring to a Talmud Chacham. A zaken is a Talmud Chacham. So you'll ask, what if a Talmud Chacham is not always a zaken? Sometimes you could have a young Talmud Chacham. Why is zaken a name for a Talmud Chacham? You could have sometimes a young Talmud Chacham. My father once told me that the Shloah HaKadosh says that only the Talmud Chacham is truly old. What does that mean? That means that when the Talmud Chacham turns 80, he owns all of his 80 years. He's a 80-year-old. But other people, when they turn 80, might only be 20. Because 60 years was, passed them by. And there's not 80 years of work, 80 years of growth, 80 years of emunah, 80 years of building shalom bayis, 80 years of work, of raising our children, al taras HaKodesh, 80 years of making sure our minds are clear and our hearts are strong. They don't have that. So by in the nature of him being a Talmud Chacham, he deserves all of his years. He's the zaken. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us the chizuk. And I said I was going to end with that, and one of the worst things I hate when speakers do is when they say they're going to end with something and then they don't. And I very, very, very rarely... Dovi's been listening to me for a very long time. Have you ever heard me violate that rule? You're thinking much too long.
I don't want to answer.
I really don't think I ever did to you. Oh, no. Oh, no. Okay, anyway, I think it's a terrible thing when speakers do that. When you say, I'm going to end with this, what you're saying is, I know it's been a bit long, and you really are getting antsy, and I promise you, I'm getting to the end. And then when you don't end with that, it's a disaster. It's a disaster. But even worse than that is to give a speech about it after. So let me just say what's on my mind here. Chazal tell us, Chayiv Adam Loimar Mosai Yagiu Ma'asai Lamasai Avoisai Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov. A person is obligated to say, when will my actions reach the actions of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? And there are many ways to understand what that Chazal means, but one element of it is what we discussed tonight. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov recognized the power and the value of every action that they did. I mean, after all, Ma'aseh Avos, Siman Labanim, every action of Avram Avinu reverberates through the generations, and we are obligated to say, Masa Yagiu Ma'aseh, when will my actions be as important to me as the actions of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov were to them? There's not a havamina that we're actually going to be like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, but Masa Yagiu Ma'aseh, when will my actions reach that the impact, the import of each one of my actions should be as profound and important and reverberating for me as it was for Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us the koyach and the siyata d'shmaya and the insight to be able to stay in the moment and to be absolutely present and real and focused on the here and now, so that we could put all our attention into serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu and amassing palaces of Kirvas Elikim, palaces of Tainug that will be waiting for us, Mirz Hashem, in the right time. Yashikayach.